A federal appeals court has ruled most of Donald Trump's tariffs are an overreach of his use of emergency powers as president. The so-called reciprocal tariffs imposed on nearly every country the U.S. trades with are being illegally imposed, the U.S. Court of Appeals said on Friday. The decision upholds a May ruling from the Court of International Trade, which also rejected Trump's argument that his global tariffs were permitted under an Emergency Economic Powers Act. The court did not halt the tariffs but instead said they would remain in place until mid-October, setting up a further legal challenge in the U.S. Supreme Court. There are still a lot of unknowns, but here's what we understand so far about the ruling and what it could mean for the U.S. president's flagship policy. What did the appeals court say? In its 7-4 decision, the appellate court backed a lower court's finding that President Trump did not have the authority to impose global tariffs. This was largely because of the law Trump used to justify the policies, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, which the judges said does not grant the power to impose tariffs, duties, or the like, or the power to tax. The U.S. Court of Appeals rejected Trump's argument that the tariffs were permitted under his emergency economic powers, calling the levies invalid as contrary to law. Trump immediately rejected the judgment, taking to Truth Social in the hours after it landed to call the appeals court highly partisan and the ruling a disaster for the country. If allowed to stand, this decision would literally destroy the United States of America, he wrote. What is the IEPA? The decades-old act, which has repeatedly been deployed by Trump during both terms in office, grants a U.S. president significant authority to respond to a national emergency or a major threat from overseas. The 1977 law states that a president can pull a number of economic levers to deal with any unusual and extraordinary threat, which has its source in whole or substantial part outside the United States, to the national security, foreign policy, or economy. It's been used by both Presidents Barack Obama and Joe Biden, who invoked the act to impose sanctions on Russia after the illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014 and then again after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine 8 years later. But the appeals court stated in its decision that the emergency law did not give the president wide-ranging authority to impose tariffs. The IEPA neither mentions tariffs, or any of its synonyms, nor has procedural safeguards that contain clear limits on the president's power to impose tariffs, they said. Trump argued when he unveiled his global tariffs that a trade imbalance was harmful to U.S. national security, and was therefore a national emergency, but the court ruled that imposing tariffs is not within the president's mandate, and the power of the purse, including the power to tax, belongs to Congress. Why is this important? Outside of being a significant setback to President Trump's centerpiece agenda, tariffs, the federal appeals court ruling could have an immediate impact on the U.S. economy, with knock-on effects felt in global markets. Businesses are going to be subject to uncertainty, Dr. Linda Yu, an economist at Oxford University and the London Business School, told the BBC's Today program. As countries wait to see if the Supreme Court will take up the case, which seems likely, they could decide to hold off on conducting business with the U.S. If this happens, Dr. Yu said, it could dampen down economic activity. There are also significant ramifications that could be felt within the political sphere. For instance, if the Supreme Court reverses the federal appeals court decision and sides with the Trump administration, it could set a precedent that emboldens the president to use the IEPA more aggressively than he has done so far. What happens next? The case will now most likely proceed to the highest U.S. court, a challenge that Trump signaled on Truth Social. Tariffs were allowed to be used against us by our uncaring and unwise politicians, Trump wrote. Now, with the help of the United States Supreme Court, we will use them to the benefit of our nation, and make America rich, strong, and powerful again. The conservative majority on America's highest court could potentially make it more likely to side with the president's view. 6 of the 9 justices were appointed by Republican presidents, including 3 that Trump selected during his first term in the White House. But the court has also been more critical of presidents when it seems they're overreaching on policies not directly authorized by Congress. During Joe Biden's presidency, for example, the court expanded on what it called the major questions doctrine to invalidate Democratic efforts to use existing laws to limit greenhouse gas emissions by power plants and to forgive student loan debt for millions of Americans.